Welcome everyone. As you know, this is a seminar and not a webinar, basically allowing us to talk to one another in a way that may be similar to a regular meeting. This is live streamed on Facebook, and we are hoping to get a wide impact and to have a discussion developed over this meeting. So the first part will include a talk or a lecture, and then we'll open it up for discussion. So hello and welcome to our seminar. This is the second meeting dedicated to responsible artificial intelligence in medicine. This series is hosted by the Bioethics and Law Center at the Faculty of Medicine in Tel Aviv University. My name is Oren Asman, and I'm the co-director of the center and will be moderating today's event. The Bioethics and Law Center promotes interprofessional collaboration in research and education in bioethics, health law, and medical humanities. We work to develop and support and strengthen ethics programs in preclinical studies and teaching hospitals. Taking a wider view, we encourage research on conceptual and normative questions that may inform policy, both locally and globally. And today's seminar is a prime example of such an issue. And I'm already eager to hear Vardit's talk about constructing an ethics framework for artificial intelligence in biomedical research. My warm thanks to Dr. Amir Tal, who coordinates this seminar, Professor Michael Bar-Ilan, our center's co-director, and all of you for joining us today. Now it's my pleasure to introduce today's speaker, and not to take any more of her time. So Vardit Ravitsky is a full professor at the bioethics program in the University of Montreal and a senior lecturer on global health and social medicine at Harvard Medical School. She is past president of the International Association of Bioethics and the incoming president and CEO of the Hastings Center, among the most prestigious bioethics research institutes in the world. Ravitsky's research focuses on the ethics of genomics and reproduction, as well as on the use of AI in biomedical research. She published over 200 articles and commentaries on bioethical issues and has given over 300 talks worldwide, and we're very happy to have you here today with us. I may just add that Vardit is a member of our center's advisory board and is a strong supporter of our activities, and we're very much grateful for your continued support, Vardit. So Vardit, the floor is yours. You're welcome to share your screen and your insights.
Thank you so much, Oren. Toda rabba. It's lovely to be with you. And I have to say, I miss being in a room, but the virtual format allows, I'm looking around the screen and I see from my mom to my Harvard students, which is really fantastic. Hi, Desi. So thank you again, Oren. I would like to use this opportunity to share with you exciting, innovative work that we're doing within our NIH project. And I have to say, it seems like AI is everywhere today. The other day, around the Shabbat dinner table, we have two teenagers at home, and we started talking about appropriate and less appropriate uses of ChatGPT for homework. And as we were exploring what they should and should not be allowed to do, I realized that families all over the world are probably having the same conversations with their teenagers and professors with their students all over the world. And I think the same is true for teams that do biomedical research. Everybody's wondering, how can we now harness the power of AI technologies that are becoming more and more user-friendly, more and more accessible, to enhance our understanding of biology and even our ability to deliver care effectively to patients. So the NIH realized that the future of biomedicine is tied to the ability to use AI responsibly, effectively, and they came up with this really innovative initiative. Oren, are my slides moving okay? An initiative called Bridge to AI, where the idea is not to necessarily find cures or interventions, but rather to create data sets that would be ready for research with artificial intelligence. I'm inviting you to go to the website to read much more, but I want to use this initiative as a way to discuss one particular research area or data type, which is the human voice. And through that example, to dig into what kinds of bioethical issues emerge when we try to do this, and give an example of the methodology that our team decided to use to explore these bioethical issues. So I'm going to talk about Bridge to AI in general, zoom into the Voice project, zoom into the bioethical issues, and finally, how we plan to address them over the next 4 to 7 years. The issue of using AI effectively in research is tied to the issue of data. Because as you all know, to train algorithms, to do machine learning, you need a huge amount of samples or enormous data sets. And in order to train AI well, these data sets need to be standardized, high quality, and the NIH agrees, ethically resourced. Many of the data sets that are out there today that algorithms are being trained on do not respond to these criteria. So the NIH decided to invest all those millions of dollars to teach us how to create data sets that respond to all this, that are ethically and responsibly collected, that are diverse enough to not create bias in the algorithms, that are standardized, and that will be open access when they're prepared for any researcher around the world to use to ask their own research questions. So that is sort of the spirit of Bridge to AI. The goal is to propel biomedical and behavioral research forward by setting the stage for widespread use of AI. So what we're actually doing is creating flagship data sets. We're not pretending to build all of the data sets that biomedicine will need over the coming decades. The NIH chose 4 examples. I'll show you what they are in a minute, to demonstrate, to illustrate what AI-ready data should look like, while emphasizing ethical best practices, how to collect this data responsibly, and how to promote diversity in the teams that work to collect the data as one way to ensure that the data itself is diverse. So you can see that these new data sets are supposed to be standardized. They're supposed to be automated tools developed around them, cross-training materials to really create a good workforce to be able to use this data, and good dissemination of those products and best practices. Bottom line, it's all about sort of the next generation of data collection that is AI ready and ethically collected. The program has 3 pillars. It's all about the data, the ethics, and the people. And it's an experiment. As you see there is a big splash on the screen. No one's ever done this before. No one has ever looked at how data is collected, at the process of data collection for AI at this level. And therefore, this is a fascinating experiment that is happening between the NIH and the investigators. The NIH created the framework, but we, the investigators, are telling them what is actually needed, and then they calibrate the way they fund this. So every year, we're kind of working on the plan for the next year. This is not one of those usual grants that you know what's happening. A lot of people have compared it to building a plane while you're flying in the air. It really feels that way. Because often we only understand the next step of the research when we've completed the current step. It's quite chaotic, very exciting, requires endless hours of meeting because, as you'll see in a few slides, hundreds of researchers in dozens of institutions are involved in this project. And just the communication between all of us is mind-blowingly complicated. You know that in the scientific discovery pipeline, there are many stages. This slide is just to emphasize that this entire initiative is focused on data preparation and creating all the tools, the teams, the data, the skills, the standards in order to do the research later. So again, this is not a regular research project where you are asking a research question and looking for outcomes. This is all about preparing the data so that others in the future can have the basis, the foundation to ask their own research questions, which is why it's so important that this is all open access. You know that industry sits currently on big and some high quality data sets, but they're not available to us researchers. This is supposed to be available to anyone who wants to dig in with their own hypotheses. So when the NIH called for applications, they didn't tell researchers what types of data to propose. They left it to the scientific community to come up with ideas. And a lot of groups proposed a lot of types of data, and these are the winners. In four, like in the Oscars, there are 4 categories, and in each one, one type of data won the grant. So for public health, we're looking at voice as a biomarker of human health. So we're actually collecting voice samples, recording individuals speaking, 30,000 samples, and we're collecting it in such a way that, as I said, will be ready for AI research. In the category of return to health, the selected data set was type 2 diabetes. The projects are so complex that if I talk about each one of them, we won't get to the ethics. So just at a very high level, there's another one that looks at how patient information is collected in ICU, many types of information, but how they can all be combined to increase our capabilities of diagnosis and risk prediction, for example, to decide how to triage patients in intensive care. And finally, functional genomics, which maps the architecture of human cells to better understand the connection between genotype and phenotype, not just you're at an increased risk for a disease because you have this mutation, but why? What happens at the level of the protein in the cell to cause disease? This is 3-dimensional mapping and temporal mapping of cells, extremely innovative. So these are the 4 data generation projects, DGPs, as we call them. The diabetes project, the critical care, the functional genomics, and the voice. And I want to, as I said, to zoom in to the voice project, not just because we are, our team is the ethics module, the ethics team on this project. We're actually the ethics team on the functional genomics project as well. So our team does the bioethics research for 2 of these 4 data generation projects. I want to zoom into voice because it's really innovative. Not a lot of people are aware of the fact that there's already an evidence base that links voice to a host of human diseases. I want to start by acknowledging our team. So these are just the leads, the co-PIs, principal investigators of this one data generation project. And under each of us, there's an entire team of PhD students and postdocs and research assistants. So this is just, and you can see all the universities and institutions on the right that are involved. So and this is just one project of 4. So this gives you kind of the flavor of how complex it is and what a challenge it is for all of us to stay connected and move forward together. So let's talk about voice for a few minutes and then dig into the bioethical issues. I love this quote. By the way, I forgot to acknowledge that the slides I'm showing today, hardly any of them are mine. These are slides of our project. Some come from the NIH team, some from our voice team. But I have to give credit to the people who worked hard to prepare them. So this is a lovely quote that says, "The human voice is the most beautiful instrument of all, but the most difficult to play." This is a part of what goes into what seems like a very simple thing that I'm doing right now, speaking to you, right? There's all these elements that go into the sound that I'm producing, my ability to articulate these words, my intonation. I'm not a voice specialist, so I can't speak to this the way my colleagues on the project do. But my son is a musician. He plays trumpet, he sings. I see every time, I have a cold, I'll sound a little less clear when I give a talk. But when you actually have challenges, especially if you're using your voice as the main tool for your work, it has huge ramifications. So I'm not sure, those of us who are not voice specialists, I'm not sure if we're aware of the complexity that goes into producing the sound and speaking. In addition to that, there's an entire psychosocial or symbolic layer here. The human voice carries identity, love, emotions. Our PI, Yael Ben Susan, always starts by saying, how when you call your mom and she just says hello and you already say, hey, mom, what's wrong? When you know somebody really well and you can instantly say that they're sad or getting sick even before they're sick. This is the level of indication that voice can give us for somebody that we know well. She says that for her, as a voice specialist, as soon as the patient walks into the room, she can detect intuitively early signs of Parkinson's, for example. There are slight changes, modifications in the voice, the articulation, that allow her, after years of experience, to detect emerging respiratory diseases or early signs of laryngeal cancer or neurological diseases. She does it based on her own experience. The idea with AI is to train algorithms to do it beyond human intuition and human experience in a way that would be much more efficient, much more accurate, and accessible to people who do not have access to voice specialists. How many of you have ever seen a voice specialist? It's a very rare specialty in medicine. And if you can bring this type of early diagnosis or ability to follow the progression of disease to people everywhere, not just near big medical centers who have the access to this specialty, it would be a game changer. So Yael, our PI, our beloved leader, has twins. And she also points out that from early on, even she could tell them apart just by listening to their cries. So, going back to this notion that voice is tied to identity, voice is, as a biomarker of health, is also a growing, I wouldn't say industry, because it's a combination of industry and publicly funded research, but the innovations in this space, in voice as a biomarker, are expected to reach 5 billion in about 5 years. So there's a lot of potential here for new diagnostic tools, new interventions, etc. And this, you can see this if you're attuned to these developments, you see them quite a bit in the media as well. But this goes beyond voice as a biomarker. I'm sure you've seen issues such as AI-powered voice in the commercial space. Some of us, when we call to make a reservation in a restaurant, we're actually speaking to a chatbot, but we don't know. Or, for example, using AI to imitate the voice of known people. So this was a fake interview between two people that, they faked their voices and created a podcast in which they're speaking to each other, but none of them actually spoke. So this is scary because we're already seeing voice used in the commercial space. For example, if you call your bank, some banks currently recognize you as a client based on your speech. What if somebody can fake your voice and call and get access to your account? There have been many concerns about fraud online and by phone based on voice, AI-powered voice faking, if you will. So these are concerns that exist outside of the biomedical field. Back to our issue of using voice as a biomarker, there is currently emerging evidence that voice can be used in a host of categories. You can see anything from mood disorders to respiratory disease, neurological disorders. Why is industry so invested, and researchers like us, so invested in better using voice as a biomarker? So we started naming those elements. Think about it. Voice can be used, can be one of the cheapest things to collect. What we're doing in our study is developing an app that you can download on your phone and record yourself at home in a quiet room and just send the voice sample to your doctor for diagnosis or follow-up of disease progression. Just imagine that. Okay, not everybody has cell phones, not everybody knows how to use them, but overall, it is one of the cheapest, non-invasive, safe to collect biomarkers that you can think of. Compare that to an X-ray or a blood draw. So this can actually be done in any low resource setting, which can make it a very effective public health tool. It can allow treatment monitoring for drug development. So imagine that you're a pharmaceutical company developing a new drug for Parkinson's, and you want to follow up on patients as they take your drug often over a long period of time. Imagine doing this by research participants just sending in their voice samples rather than coming in for follow-up. So the potential for drug development is quite mind-blowing. And also just patient monitoring from afar. So imagine you have a chronic disease and your provider can follow up on disease progression just by listening to your voice or even to your voice recordings. This is an amazing tool for telehealth and for mental health services because speech is so linked to depression, to other mental conditions. It can really be used effectively for diagnosis, assessment of risk. For example, there are phone lines for suicide prevention that are now beginning to think about integrating AI in order to assess the level of risk of those who call in. And if this is actually more reliable than human, intuitive assessment of level of risk, again, it can be a game changer and who gets access faster to preventive services. So just touching on the variety of uses and potentials that voice as a biomarker has, and that is why the investment in this field is so big. So we see this emerging evidence everywhere. Many papers published all the time about how voice can be used with research fueled by artificial intelligence to accomplish all these objectives. And at the same time, our colleagues who are actually voice specialists tell us that when they meet a patient, what can they give them now? A piece of paper, like a form and a pen, and ask them to follow up by hand the voice changes that they can that they feel on themselves. So there's this huge gap between this high-tech AI-powered research that is happening in the background and what patients are actually offered today, which is the lowest tech intervention you can imagine of just, oh, if you feel some changes in your voice, write it down on a piece of paper and bring it back next time you see me. So there's this enormous gap. Why is that? First of all, researchers are working in silos. Those working on laryngeal disorders, on neurological disease, on mood disorders, they work in disconnect. They don't all collaborate to understand the relationship of a voice as a biomarker to these various types of conditions. There are also enormous challenges in how AI research is blocked, or the barriers that it faces today because of the kinds of data that we have. So the data sets we have today, and by data set, I mean just collections of voice recordings, okay? The data sets are small. They're not diverse enough. Voice is, in many jurisdictions, private health information if you use it for biomedical research. So there are issues in accessing it and sharing it. There are no standards for acoustic quality. If you want to train an algorithm and some of your samples are high quality and others are not, you're confusing your machine learning. Huge impact of language and accents, which leads back to the issue of diversity, because if you trained your algorithm on an English accent and then you have a Hispanic accent, this patient will get less effective interventions because the algorithm is struggling to identify their issues because of the difference. As I said, there's a disconnect between technology and clinical practice. There's no infrastructure for building large databases. All of this creates this shackle that you see and slows down AI-powered research. And these are the issues that the Bridge to AI is meant to solve. Each one of these boxes is supposed to get an answer through our project. We aim to build an ethically sourced, diverse, and AI-ready database of 30,000 human voices linked to health information from 5 categories of diseases. I'll mention these diseases because it really shows, again, the huge potential of this project. So vocal pathologies like laryngeal cancers, neurological and neurodegenerative disorders like Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, and ALS, mood and psychiatric disorders, schizophrenia, bipolar, respiratory disorders, pneumonia, even heart failure, and pediatric diseases, autism, speech delay. So you can just get a sense of the richness, the broad spectrum of conditions that researchers believe can all be detected earlier, followed up, drug development assisted, and potential interventions offered based on voice. And again, if you look at these diseases in silos, you're missing an incredible research opportunity. So how are we different from what existed before, those siloed research projects, and what happens in industry currently? We aim to build a large-scale, ethically sourced, diverse database. We're going to develop standards for voice acquisition. How are these recordings done? How to ensure standardized quality? And how do we ensure all that in the wild, which means patients collect their samples at home? We're developing ethical guidelines about data sharing, privacy, who owns this data, legal and ethical implications of its use, and we're all about disseminating this knowledge. This is not for commercial purposes. This is not for making money. It's not for for IP. It's for sharing in an open, creating an open source that is available for future research. So this was all the context. What is Bridge to AI? What problems does it want to solve? And as an example, as an illustration, the power of this approach in one project, which is the Voice Project. Now I want to shift gears and talk about what bioethical issues emerge. I'll use voice as an example, but many of my issues are relevant across the board for all those data sets and will be long-standing bioethical issues when it comes to using AI in biomedicine. The first example is diversity and bias. And Oren, I'm sure that other speakers have and will talk about this issue because it's, of course, one of the most prominent ethical issues in using AI in biomedicine. How can voice-based algorithms be equitably applicable to different populations so that we avoid bias towards certain overrepresented groups? I mentioned this But when you look at the existing data sets, whether in voice or other, in genomics, it's a well-known problem. We see an overrepresentation of white populations, of European people from European descent, of males, of people from higher socioeconomic backgrounds who have better access to participation in health. We see a disadvantage of communities that historically have mistrust in the research enterprise and do not want to participate. When it comes to voice, this is, again, particularly problematic because different populations are not just different at the maybe genetic level or in terms of social determinants of health, but even accent and articulation will play a role. So the diversity of the data sets in our 30,000 flagship database is particularly important. Add to this diversity of age. A baby, a toddler, a teenager, an old person don't sound the same. Our voice changes over our lifetime. Each of these populations raise different issues for consent, for continued consent. We are developing currently consent forms for a pediatric population, so parents consenting for voice collection of their children. What happens to these voice samples when the child is no longer a minor? We have been discussing issues in voice collection from older populations. An example of something really interesting that we discussed, we hold a recording of somebody and they die, and now they're deceased and their family wants the recording, maybe for emotional reasons. Who owns the recording? So all sorts of fascinating issues that we never thought about that are associated with the age groups that we're going to collect from. And of course, the issue of accessibility. In the first stage of our project, we will collect in clinics. So this is very limiting. Most of our participants will live near big medical centers. By year 4, we hope that our app, our smartphone app, will work and we can collect from anywhere in the world, which really opens up the issue of diversity, also in terms of socioeconomic and geographic distribution. The whole point of all this is to reduce the bias in what we develop. Privacy and threats to confidentiality. Another well-known issue in biobanking in general, but AI will exacerbate this. And voice, because it is so cost-effective, non-invasive, easy and safe to collect, presents particular challenges. Oren is recording this talk, right? My voice is going to be now online. If we're successful, maybe the talk that I'm given now can be used to detect all sorts of emerging diseases that I don't know I have. How can this be used against me later in my life in terms of employment, insurance? We just don't know yet what this will create and what risks are associated, but we're all recording our voice all the time and putting it out there. Well, at least when Oren puts my voice online at the end of today's talk, my voice will not be linked to all my health data. It will not be linked to my DNA, to my past health history, to my current blood pressure, which is very high, Oren, because I'm so excited to give this talk. But what we propose to do in this project is to link the voice recordings to a very rich data set related to health. So basically, we will be collecting genomics data and imaging and history from those 30,000 participants so that we can develop voice as a biomarker. So the threat to privacy and confidentiality is enormous. And I said voice is a very linked to identity. Can it be used to expose individual identity without people's consent later on? So this is just a touch of the issues that we're looking at when it comes to privacy. Then there's data sharing and potential commercial use. If somebody comes to us and generously donates their voice sample for our research, are we allowed later on? And I said we will tell them that we don't know what research questions will be asked based on this data set. some will investigate Parkinson's, another will investigate schizophrenia. So we can't tell them what research uses their voice will serve. But are we allowed to then take the entire data set and share it with Google, because they have a very exciting research project that can run faster because they can validate this compared to an enormous data set that they already collected commercially? Are we allowed to do that? What if we just want to share in ways that we couldn't foresee in the consent form? So I know these are not new questions. Bioethicists working on biobanking have been dealing with them for a long time. But we're proposing at least to use federated learning, which means the data does not leave the original institution where it was collected, but we teach the algorithms this on the same data set, despite the fact that it's distributed in different locations. It's mostly a technological issue, but it has bioethical ramifications. And we're looking into the issue of public-private partnerships. The industry is moving currently faster than publicly funded research. As I said, there's billions of dollars to be made. Last week or 2 weeks ago, we had a voice symposium, an international voice symposium, and founders of startups came from all over the world to join us. Fascinating what they're working on. And they're moving fast because they have investors and they want outcomes. They don't have like the public funding that we have. We can do things a little slower, pay a lot of attention to ethics and responsibility and all these issues. They're moving fast. So maybe we should collaborate with them rather than try to limit them or hold our information and not share. Don't know. Explainability and reliability. Again, one of the greatest issues in AI, and I'm sure other speakers in this series will touch on it. So these algorithms are a black box, right? We don't know what actually happens when the machine learns and tells us this patient has a higher risk of developing Alzheimer's in 10 years than that patient. But if we want patients to trust prognosis, diagnosis, or even suggested interventions that are tailored to them because AI said it's better or AI said it's going to happen, should we open the black box and make sure that we develop explainable AI? Should we develop machine learning that allows clinicians to understand how these conclusions were reached so that they can explain that to their patients to increase trust in what we're offering? But what if opening the black box and making all this explainable reduces the efficiency or the reliability of the outcomes? What if it's better to keep the black box closed and invisible because the outcomes will be better? So if you were my patient and I said to you, I can offer you an intervention where the algorithm is explainable, but less reliable, or I can offer you something that I don't know why this is suggested for you, but statistically, based on what we know, it will work better. What would you choose as a patient? And is this even an issue? We're going to be interviewing all the stakeholders. Maybe clinicians don't care. Maybe patients don't care. Maybe they just want reliable diagnostics and interventions, and they don't care about understanding. Who knows? And finally, science communication to build trust. These are complex projects. The science behind them is complex. How do we tell the public about what we're doing, but without creating hype? Did I create hype today when I talked about voice as a biomarker? Did I make it sound like this is all around the corner sooner than we can actually deliver in a more reliable way than we can actually deliver? So these are some of the issues we're looking at, and how are we looking at them? So again, our team led by Professor Vardit Ravitsky and myself with Yael, our PI. We are using something called a value-sensitive design that starts with an inquiry-oriented approach. So we're not just reading the literature and thinking about what the issues are. We're asking. Who are we asking? Everybody. We're asking all the stakeholders. They can be the researchers in our project, researchers elsewhere, patients, basic scientists in the lab, AI developers, patient communities, the public, anyone who has any stake in this, which again, I think is almost everybody, is invited to engage with us, to identify, to inform our thinking and to identify what the ethical issues are. Then we're building a governance framework. We're suggesting solutions to all these things, but then we're testing our solutions with the stakeholders. So we have a stakeholder forum that helps us develop the initial frameworks. And then we have multi-site stakeholder engagement to refine the framework, to nuance it, and to test it, to see if it actually responds to the needs of the AI developers, the clinicians, the researchers, and of course, the patients. We're doing this in 3 stages. The first one is conceptual. Like every good researcher, we need to understand what's already out there. We're doing extensive literature reviews to see what principles, values have already been named. And we look at conceptual tools to allow us to examine tensions between values. So for example, I noted explainability versus reliability. How do we negotiate values when they're conflicting with each other? We want to suggest conceptual tools for tension resolution between values. Then we take what we have developed with the help of our stakeholders who are informing us, and we are actually moving to an empirical stage. We're using interviews. We're using a Delphi method, consensus building, expert consultation. We're using several known empirical bioethics methods to dig deeper into what the issues actually are. And the last stage is, after we've refined our framework or our proposed solutions and principles, we're looking into how to implement them, how to deliver them. This is called the technical stage, but it's way beyond technical. It's about delivering in real life, a conceptually and empirically based, ethical, trustworthy design of data generation, and anticipating what the issues will be when there are clinical applications of, when the research is actually done on these data sets and there are clinical applications. We are anticipating what the issues will be. What will a conversation look like in the clinic when you're offered an AI-based intervention that is tailored to you because of your own individual voice as a biomarker? What will be the issues then, and how can we address them ahead of time? So my last slide is our sort of logo of the project. Thank you so much, and I'm very excited to have a discussion about all of this.
Thank you so much, Vardit. So now is our second part. Before we begin taking questions and comments, first, if you would like to participate in this discussion, it'll be wonderful if you could open up your camera, unless there are privacy issues that you want us not to be aware of. And also, please raise your hand using the raise hand option. And I would like to begin by asking my dear colleague, Professor Bar-Ilan, if you may have, I'm sure you do, some thoughts and potentially ideas to share with us following Vardit's talk. Please, Michael.
Shalom, אחרי צהריים טובים. Thank you very much. Congratulations, Vardit, for your new job or title. It's an honor for everybody. I also apologize that I may have to leave soon because there is a Sefat Orim meeting my child's teachers. This artificial intelligence cannot do yet.
Yes.
I hope it did. I'll be short. I wish to raise one point of great concern to me, which I did not see mentioned. As we know, Socrates said that the goal of philosophy is know thyself. And with these algorithms, we are standing in front of a situation where others will know us in many ways better than we do. And here, we would like maybe to go like in the old times in Venice. You would walk the street with a mask that not be noticed which houses you frequent. You do a job application and someone or insurance application, somebody might detect that you might have this illness or this risk or the other. Even if this use might be regulated, at least legally, the greater risk will come by bypassing this regulation. So companies, whoever may employ algorithms that would allegedly tell that you may have cancer and you are not reliable and you're a liar, and they are as good as astrology, and nobody would know. And the third point related to it that I wish to raise today is even if we have reliable systems, you can easily bypass them, because you don't need to ask the AI whether who among the candidates is harboring cancer and is not worth investing money in. You can only ask who is more likely to stay longer on the job. So by this ultimate goal, you bypass the health sensitive issue. And the availability of these very wide prediction tools, whether it's dementia, but other things, the possibility of charlatanism or not well-checked applications in the periphery, and the possibility to bypass sensitive issues like genetics by indirect ways of prying the AI is something I will be happy to hear your thoughts about.
Whoa. Ichel, you're asking a very fundamental question that applies beyond voice, of course. Anybody can pick up a hair you left behind, send it to 23andMe, and know things about you that maybe you don't know yet because you haven't done that.
Yes, but voice and also picture is not a hair falling. You can record my voice now, and I don't believe you are not even in Israel at this moment. So it's very widely valuable. And about the hair, so far we know that you can check for DNA, but it's very difficult to tell what kind of voice is more dynamic, what kind of answers application of AI on voice might bring, what kind of questions. It's quite open. It leads to character, it leads to aspects that are much broader than what we usually seek in hair samples or genetic samples.
True. So as I noted, some of the issues are shared across other types of biomarkers, and some are unique to voice, and they actually, it's a paradox. Because it is so accessible, so non-invasive, and so easy to collect, the issues specifically in voice will be much harder to resolve. But I think your philosophical question requires a bit of a philosophical answer. The risks are enormous, and the potential benefits are also enormous. Are the risks such that we should pause or stop this area of research? Some of us are more conservative and would say yes. And there's actually bioethics work about areas of research that we should not engage in because the social risks are too high. The Hastings Center just last week came out with a report about the types of genomics research that we should not engage in for this reason. So there's the normative answer of how do we weigh the risks and the benefits. I spend most of my time now explaining the benefits, very little time on the risks, which is why I said you might accuse this entire talk of being a big exercise of hyping the science. But I think that's because I am biased, and I'm a big believer in these benefits being a game changer for millions of patients, especially because this is a diagnostic tool that could serve populations in low resource settings. So to me, it's not just that the benefit is medical, it's that it would be widely available because of the nature of voice and the ease of collecting voice. So I'm acknowledging my bias and my enthusiasm because of this public health and equity benefit. At the same time, the risks that you're pointing to are already here. Fake voice is already here. People can pretend to be you, as I said, and call your bank or your wife. And people are freaking out about this, of course, because voice is so personal and it's such an identifier and it's such an intuitive identifier. I think the non-normative answer to your question is that it will happen no matter what we do. As you know, the genie's out of the bottle. The Pandora box is open. You can use any metaphor you want. It's already here. So the best that we can do under the circumstances is to have the ethics governance in the biomedical sphere, so that at least when we use it for diagnosis and treatment, it is done ethically and responsibly. And like every other field in life, come up with regulation to minimize what you've described. In any other field, we have legal tools to fight fraud and exploitation and discrimination. So think about the anti-genetic discrimination laws in so many countries. Are they perfect? No. Do they protect us from everything? No. But we legislated, we tried. We need to do the same around voice. The recognition that it's a powerful biomarker and powerful identifier in so many other ways that you named is there, or it's emerging. Now it's time to employ our regulatory tools. I think that when we as bioethicists think about this in the health dimensions, what we come up with can then be employed also outside of health. So if we think about diversity and equity and privacy in biomedicine, some of our insights can then be employed when we regulate in the employment sphere, for example. A lot of work ahead for researchers, for legislators, and it's also about a culture of ethics, right? Every technology can be used for good and bad. We always repeat that. It's not the technology itself that is unethical. It's what people do with it. So we need to create a culture of responsible use of AI in general. And as you say, voice in particular. So I know this was a very high level answer, but you asked a very high level question.
Thank you. Thank you, Vardit. So there are several people who wrote questions, but in order to allow us to maybe actually have a discussion, if you have a slow internet connection or for other reasons are not able to open your camera, you're still able to open just your microphone and ask your questions. So Ramona, would you like to present your question directly using your microphone? I'll see if you can unmute. All right, so I'll just present the question Ramona wrote. So understanding that this is in the early stages of development, can you please talk a little about how the results of this research will be shared with the participants?
Fascinating question. I think I intentionally avoided it because we're struggling with various approaches. So for the voice recordings, we hope to give them their samples, give them ownership. It's so easy to share. Why shouldn't they have it? But that's the easy part. What about sharing what we do with this? What about the future? Sharing with them what research questions have actually been applied to the data set that includes their individual sample. What about if we develop a multi-billion-dollar intervention based on this? Back to the issue of HeLa cells, and do they stand to gain anything from their participation? We told them no, but will they be upset later on when they know what came of this? Even though nothing was promised now. These are all, again, questions that any data set is worried about. And we're asking ourselves this. We hope, of course, to return to our participants with updates about what we're doing. But here, this is particularly challenging because, as I said a million times, this is a data generation project. We are not the ones conducting the research. We're creating a foundation What will be done with it over the next 5, 10, 20 years? We have no idea. And maybe some of the questions that will be asked of this data, we can't even imagine now. And therefore, of course, we cannot imagine their implications. So what are we promising our participants in terms of reciprocity? We will get back to you. We will update you. How far can we go with this? There's, like in every research participation, we don't promise benefits. But if we start detecting things, do we get back to them with clinically useful information? Probably yes. 30,000 people. Do we have the resources to do this properly? Probably no. Very, very complex. We're aware of the ethical dimensions of getting back to participants, but it goes way beyond giving them a copy of their voice recording so that they have it. It's extremely broad and longitudinal and rich. And because this is focused on data generation, I'm not sure we can go very far with what participants will get back.
Thank you. Also, as we're focusing on diversity, when you ask a question, it will be useful if you share at least which country you're from. So thank you, Ramona. You may write to us where you're from if you want. Damilare, we had you in the last meeting. Can you open up your microphone? You had some things to share with us. I'll ask you to unmute.
All right, thank you very much. Apologies, not quite in the place to show my face. I hope that is okay.
Sure, we hear you well.
Okay, yeah, quite an insightful and exciting presentation. As a medical lawyer here in Nigeria, always looking forward to hearing the compliance side of this. I mean, it's quite exciting that AI is going to change so many things in the health sector, and but can be troubling as well. So I was looking at, finding answers to the potential issues that were raised during the presentation. How exactly can we ensure that the issues of the bioethical issues, ethical issues will be protected? Patients' consent. For instance, during the presentation, the area of merely speaking is enough to catch your data. For instance, as I'm talking like this, could be enough for research work. How do we protect, in reality, all these issues so that the issue of privacy is guaranteed and it doesn't affect the future of AI as a whole? And who, at the end of this, will be responsible if, for instance, because AI is simply saying machine is doing the thing, can you sue a machine? Who will be responsible for whatever work is done at the end of the day? So I would like to hear views on that. How do we really, how do we address these issues legally? And how do we protect the eventualities that happen at the end of the day? I hope my question is straightforward.
It's clear and straightforward, but extremely challenging and, again, very high level. So in terms of our project, we're working hard for the consent to be comprehensive, for people to understand what is the purpose of the recording and what will happen with their sample. But you're right that the issue of we get a recording for one purpose and then it's used for other purposes is always there. Even if we don't share the data with commercial entities, can there be data breaches? We see these things all the time. All the issues that you raised are particularly important because of something that you yourself said. How do we protect the future of AI? Because if we lose trust, the trust of the public in this tool, then our research is useless. And trust is in many levels. Is a patient trusting a clinical recommendation based on an algorithm because society learned that AI-powered research in biomedicine leads to better outcomes? That's one level of trust. But another level of trust is what came up from Yechia's question and your question. Do we as a society trust that the benefits from all these developments outweigh the risks to us as individuals, as citizens. So if we fail in protecting privacy and medical confidentiality, and if we get to a state where voice as a biomarker is used against individuals, as the example was given in employment, or just in social life, if we get to that point and there's a social backlash against those AI-based developments, legislation may just put a stop to these developments, ban them. So I think there's a real trust here. I repeated the term a lot because it's the foundation of everything that we're doing within biomedicine and outside of it. Why do you trust healthcare right now? Because it delivers. Will this deliver? Yes, hopefully, potentially, but at what cost, right? So I go back to regulation, governance. At first, it might be governance that professional societies impose upon themselves. And then it may gradually translate into policy, into actual public policy. But it will take time to develop it in a way that is nuanced enough to address these complexities that we talked about. And that's exactly what we're working on. When I said we're developing a governance framework informed by all the stakeholders, we're talking to the AI developers to understand maybe our solution is just not possible technically. We're talking to the clinicians to understand when they will have these conversations, what will they need? What tools will they need to deliver this? We're talking to patients to see what they care about. Maybe we have big concerns in bioethicists, but they just don't care. So that's why we're not trying to imagine ourselves what the issues look like. We're talking to everybody in order to create exactly what you said, the solutions, the principles, and the real life regulation that can help us at least mitigate all these risks. I love that my talk was about the benefits and all the questions are about the risks. You're putting me back in my black box and reminding me that things are not so simple. I never thought they were simple. But the solution will, the socially responsible solutions will emerge gradually from projects such as this.
Thank you, Vardit. Desi, please.
Thank you. Hi. Hi, Professor Ravitsky. Thank you very much for the fascinating talk as usual. And thank you to the Tel Aviv University Bioethics and Law Center for this wonderful setup. I hope to ask a question about benefits, actually. You mentioned that the Voice project will be collecting more multi-layered data about the participants, probably, the healthcare records. Apparently, part of the health history would be of relevance and interest. And I was wondering whether you plan to actually collect more information about their socioeconomic background, all the conditions they'll be living in, given how prevalently social determinants of health actually affect morbidity and mortality. And if you are doing that, this is probably a question to the data scientists, but I'm sure that you're on the top of the things. If you're doing that, if you're collecting also this additional data, have you thought about ways to manage it so that it is representative, but it's collected and managed in a still privacy-preserving ways, or more privacy-preserving ways than what the data as such would represent, because it could reveal actually a lot. And if you're doing that, what would those techniques be, and do you think they would mitigate the privacy aspects that you just raised?
Thank you, Desi. Challenging question as usual, just like in class. So I spoke about the ethics module of our project. There's also a data acquisition module that looks at who are we collecting from and how we collect, and a standards module that asks the question of how to standardize these samples so that the data set is ready for machine learning, right? Because if it's not standardized, we're losing a huge edge of AI. So to answer the technical aspects of your question, We are linking to health records. We are collecting genomics information. We're doing our best to make sure it's diverse. And this is all important for the data set to actually be useful for researchers in the future. At the same time, because we're linking all these sets of information, as you pointed out, it will be the potential for misuse and harm is enormous. So what are we doing? So as I pointed out, at least at first, federated learning, so the samples stay where they are, they're not traveling. We need to build mechanisms for linking, but also delinking. So within this data set, all the information about you, your voice recording, and everything about your health will be connected, but we need mechanisms to then also disconnect your voice from this rich medical information. Yeah, these are all technical issues that I can't describe the solutions to, but at least I can say we're aware of it. And sorry, I forgot the last element of your question. You said, how do you protect privacy and?
Do you expect that the technique, I mean, you're probably designing at ethical level techniques that will be mitigating the concerns around having so much enriched data available to you. I think you just said that essentially that you'll be doing that, but do you also expect that this may actually weigh in and kind of mitigate some of the more general concerns around privacy, but also cybersecurity? Essentially, are you going to be using data science and technical fix to try to address the ethical issues in this specific way?
Yes, of course. There's also a tools module. I'm getting the opportunity to talk about how those data generation projects are constructed. There's a tool module that, beyond developing the app for the smartphone for the recording, looks at all these issues of an AI-ready data set is beyond how do we collect the data. It's how do we secure the data. And there's an ethical tension here. You want the most information about every individual so that you can develop voice as a biomarker, but the more you collect, the more you expose this individual to societal potential harm unintentionally. So that's why these projects are so big and require so many participants, because as a bioethicist, I can't tell you how the data acquisition and tool scientists are building these mechanisms. I can just tell them what their societal risks are based on our experience with other data sets so that they can address them. So this is you're just giving me an opportunity to highlight the interdisciplinary nature of this project, because we tell each other across the modules what the problems are, and then we use our own specific expertise to come up with solutions. In the genomics problem recently, one of the basic scientists reached out to us and said, AI is now allowing me to fabricate data in a way that raises ethical issues, but I'm not sure what they are. You tell me, and then I will go back to the drawing board and see how I can use AI in a way that reduces the chance of misuse and data fabrication. So just an example of how we speak across the modules within the project to help each other identify the issues and the solutions. But this requires this kind of collaboration. I can't come up with the problems if I just sit in my office as a bioethicist and read the literature. I need to talk to the people on the ground, and the people on the ground sit in very different contexts.
Thank you. I mean, and I think this brings another interesting point up, that bioethicists would also need to almost become data scientists to a certain extent, or get very good understanding of AI development in order to be able to understand how specific techniques actually tip the balance, whether it is beneficial in terms of benefit risk, and whether it meets and addresses various other concerns, privacy, cybersecurity, so that the entire framework is ethically sound. So we kind of are wearing more than one hat, I guess, at a certain point.
I'll answer jokingly that we've known for decades that bioethicists have to be everything. They have to be conceptual and empirical and anthropologists and clinicians, and now they have to be AI developers. We have to be everything to do our job well, and we can't, which is why we have to work in teams.
Thank you. Doreen, please.
Hi, Doreen from Israel. I wanted to say that, at least from first, thank you for a fascinating presentation. From my perspective in the field, that most companies, when they produce AI products for medicine, for med sector, they go to hospitals, at least in Israel, and license the data. So usually the market is based on money. They don't really give it for free, and there is several ways to do it by joint ventures or licensing. But you mentioned the word open source, and this brings me to think that most entrepreneurs will maybe fear using the data based on open source, as if that means that they will have to give their application or product on the same terms. So do you mean that, was that what you mean when you say open source, or is it more, I don't know.
Got it. So very good question that allows me to clarify. If we are successful, by the end of the project, we will have a flagship, amazing data set of 30 samples, high quality, completely standardized, and attached to rich health data for researchers to jump into and explore any aspect of biomarkers for any disease, right? So it sounds amazing. But when I say open source, what do I mean? I mean that this will be, because it was publicly funded by the NIH, any researcher will be able to apply for permission to have access to it, okay? So part of the governance framework that we're developing is standards for who should get permission. So you will have to show us that you're a researcher, tell us where you work. Are you working in a public institution? Are you working for a private company? What will be your research question? Is it a responsible question? Does it have scientific utility? Will the outcomes of your research be equitable? Will it not suffer from bias? So we are developing the set of questions that you will be asked when you apply for permission to use this data set for your question. Now you've developed something out of it. Does that mean that what you developed has to be open source? This is the next generation question. I really don't know the answer yet. I think if the answer is yes, it will really limit, as you pointed out, who will want to use it and how. Even if the researchers using it are publicly funded researchers, often from the emerging evidence, they want to, create a startup. They want to implement commercially. So we are at the point of who gets permission to use the data. And the bioethics question 2.0 will be what happens to what they create with the data. But it's a little early for that, so I don't have an answer to the first one either. We're working on it, but we haven't fully started to think about the second one.
Thank you. Adeola from Nigeria, you had a question. I think it's a research-related question. Would you like to share this with us? Yeah, so let me present the question to you, Vardit. I think it may be a question about the way that the research is done. I'm not sure you'll have the answer for this. Let me find the question now. So how do you want to standardize the recordings? Are they supposed to be a response to a particular question or a standardized question, an answer format? So this is really about the data generation. And while we're focusing more on the ethical aspects, maybe it has some relation to one another. So what's your response?
So I do have the answer. To fully standardize the data set, the recordings have to be identical. So there's a set of sentences that people will be reading into the app. And it's just fascinating. Think about a 10-year-old reading the sentences versus an 89-year-old with cognitive decline reading those sentences, right? Just imagine the difference that would emerge. The recordings themselves will be standardized.
Right, and then there's like
but again,
literacy and other aspects of abilities that are not necessarily aged. Just so yeah, and different languages.
So they obviously have to be simple sentences, but it's not like, well, we will record. Oh, and tell us about yourself for 3 minutes, and then Nurit, you tell us about yourself. No. It's completely standardized in terms of what we are recording.
Wait. So Vardit, let me barge in. So, well, if you want 30,000 people who are representative of different cultures, different countries, and so on. Now, I'm not sure. Let's just take Israel for an example, a small country of less than 10 million people. Some people have less of a good command in English than others. This would be one limit. There are other aspects. So, I mean, it sounds like a big challenge, actually, just to gather the information. I mean, that in itself is a huge challenge.
Thank you for acknowledging the complexity of what we're trying to do, even at this very basic level of collecting the data technically. So we are approached by collaborators. For example, somebody from Colombia said, hey, let's use the platform that you're creating to collect in our local language, or even dialects. But of course, as you go into more languages, the data set becomes smaller unless you have the same kind of funding. Yes, accents, languages, level of education, these are all challenges. And when we say diversity, it's way beyond age and ethnicity. In voice, it's related to all these things that you don't have in blood and X-rays, right? So we are paying attention to all that. And sorry, I was about to use your question to talk about diversity in terms of, okay, I forgot the point that I wanted to make. It was really good, and I hope it'll come back to me.
Yeah. Okay. Yes, Amir, you want to say something?
Yeah. First of all, thanks indeed. Like really an amazing lecture and amazing work, really. I was wondering if you collect one sample of the voice, like is it like one sample of each individual or several recordings?
I'm not sure exactly, but I'm sure it's more than one because, of course, you want to calibrate and validate. So I don't remember how many.
Right. Just like, for example, if we talk about Israel, I don't know, somebody is recording their voice, state of mind of someone who's getting missiles across their heads or whatever, just for example. So in that sense, like how do you clear it, or I guess
so again, this issue of standardizing is very complex because I remember discussions about recording people in the morning versus at the end of the day. When you're tired, you're less articulate. I'm not a morning person. In the morning, I probably sound like other people sound at night. So it's not just time of day and age. It's also individual. So the standardizing encompasses many dimensions. And Oren, I think what I wanted to say about your challenge about language and accent and level of education is that if you're looking at the pediatric population that we're including, you're collecting cries and you're collecting cough and things that are voice but are not speech. So how do you standardize the collection of babies crying? I don't know. That's the data science, the data acquisition scientist, but the challenges are enormous, and the issue of diversity is just incredibly deep.
Well, this is not scientific, but you can look up Oprah Winfrey. There was a woman being interviewed like maybe 15 years ago, and she gave 6 examples of how young babies cry, and she has an interpretation for each cry, what it means. It's very funny, but who knows? Maybe in the future it would be more than just funny, maybe this intuition becomes something that is measurable. Any more questions around here from our audience? So using my my microphone for now until you have more questions. I'm thinking, when I was listening to your talk, Vardit, so we're discussing a lot of practical ethics now, like a lot of how do we do it, how do we deal with things that are happening. So really on the level of implementation and how do we make it ethical. So in a way, some claim that we haven't started with the deep normative questions. We're running directly to discussing specific issues. Now, in a way, listening to you presenting your project, I thought you were trying to do both things, but in a way, you start with what people already said about, let's talk about bias, let's talk about diversity, let's talk about privacy, and so on. Like the main issues that are mentioned in many of the texts, the later texts, and trying to create guidelines and so on, and start from there in a way and see how we can deal with them. But then you're saying it's also like a grounded theory work, because we go and we talk to people, we see what bothers them, and we see what's happening. So you may return to a higher level of the discussion, a more normative one, and have some insights. So like in a way, you're trying to do everything, not everything, but try to touch different levels, and just showing that the complexities of doing the practical ethics related work. It seems that maybe one cannot do all the levels in the same depth of work. I'm sharing my thoughts. It's really not exactly a question, I guess. But you already have things to say, so please, Vardit.
No, but thank you for this, because you're actually putting your finger on a sensitive issue that we had to deal with when we were applying for this grant, because we came to the NIH and we said, this is inquiry-based ethics. We're not going to tell you now what the issues are. We are going to engage with stakeholders. We will show you the method by which we will engage with them, but we're not going to tell you now what we're guessing the issues are. This will be grounded and emerge from the reality of the different types of developers and implicated parties. So we will tell you in a year or two. And the NIH said, yeah, but still, what are the basic issues? What does the literature say? You can't be completely agnostic when it comes to the substantial issues. We want a flavor, at least examples of what might come up. And we tried to be sort of loyal to our methodology and say, well, this is research. We don't know what the issues are until we do the research. But of course, we found a middle ground, and we wrote up based on our knowledge of the literature and based on normative analysis and by analogy to other fields in bioethics, of course, like biobanking, what issues we predict will be very salient, insisting that this is not a full picture and there might be other things that we just cannot think about ourselves. And we're seeing those things beginning to come to us now, which is really exciting, because, literature reviews are great, but you're kind of replicating what other people's thought about. This is innovative research. We expect also innovative bioethics to be done. So this is a negotiation, exactly as you said, between the normative conceptual foundation of what the basic issues are and remaining open-minded to actually listen to the concerns as they are formulated through the work on this data acquisition. So it's both. You're right. It's both. But we're very, very married to this notion of inquiry-driven bioethics and not thinking now that we have the full picture, because we don't.
Thank you. Any more questions, people? So, Nurit, is there something you wanted to say? Yeah, I'm opening it. Just unmute.
Damilare has his hand up.
Oh, yeah.
That I can see.
So, Damilare, please. Nurit, you wanted to say something? Please, I'm sorry.
You said it for me, so I'm just fascinated by your speech, and I'm very happy to see you about this.
Okay.
Nice to see you.
Damilare, please. Thank you. Just unmute.
Yeah. Okay. I hope I'm audible.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So it just came to my mind talking about diversity. So I noticed that there are about just 2 of us from Nigeria here, probably in Africa. So and this is a global issue. How is the research? I mean, is there a place for Africa in this research? Because it's a global issue. And what is being done to ensure that it covers every continent?
Thank you so much for this question. So we are not pretending that at this preliminary stage, we can actually cover the diversity of human voices. This would require all continents and all languages and all dialects, and each one with enough representation to train algorithms. So this will probably take many years. But, and thank you for this question at this point in time, because this allows me to say sort of concluding words about the project. The point of the NIH pouring millions of dollars into this is not to create a data set of 30,000 voices. That's just a tool. It's to teach us how to do this. So we are constantly studying the process by which we're creating these data sets. What do we need to standardize? What tools do we need to develop? What ethical principles should guide this whole effort? And this is like a skeleton. We think of it as a skeleton. Voice is one type of flesh that you put on the skeleton, but the skeleton can then be applied anywhere for any type of data. So the idea is that we will deliver through this 4-year effort a platform, a structure, a framework for how to do this responsibly. And then this will really be open source. Anybody can copy it when they go to Nigeria, to Iceland, to Spain, to Australia, to collect data on Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, cancer. So regardless of the location, regardless of the population, regardless of the disease or the AI algorithm, we want to develop the way, how to do it well and how to do it ethically. So again, those 4 projects are just almost random examples of data that can be collected. The NIH could have picked others. They picked ones that they thought would be exciting and innovative and also useful. But the notion is to create this framework so that others can come and pour into it their locations and their research interests, so that what we're building now will actually be useful for many years to come as a way to collect AI-ready, ethically sourced data. And that is my concluding sentence.
Thank you very much, Vardit. So I think maybe with this, I will tell you that I'm thinking that the next types of writing that we may see more of is coming back to books like Brave New World, but maybe discussing this new reality where the concept of living in the world, the concept of privacy, of relationship, of communication might be different. It has a lot of interesting implications of how we view ourselves as human beings, as a society, how we view relationship. And I think it's something to consider already right now. So you may have been joking about the concept of being a bit paranoid about what it may mean, but I'm not only thinking about being afraid of it. It's a question about how would our future look like? How would our children's future look like? And I think that's something for philosophers, for novelists, for psychologists and others to start, maybe not start, to continue thinking about. And I'm looking forward to maybe writing, but I'm sure reading about these kind of things. I think it's whatever we thought of as novels and as fiction seems to be closer today than it was before. So with that, I want to thank you, Vardit, and I want to thank all of you from different countries in the world for joining us today. And I want to tell you that our next meeting of this seminar will be in exactly 2 weeks from now on May 16th. So we're going to hear Dr. Andreas Reyes from the division of the chief scientist of the World Health Organization. And it's going to be focusing again on ethics and governance of AI for health, the guidance of the World Health Organization. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for joining us. And I hope to see you on our next event. And if you haven't registered yet, you're welcome to do that on our website. Thank you so much and see you.